The wind cut through the plains like a blade, dry, sharp, and indifferent. It carried dust and silence, the kind of silence that grows where screams have long since died out. She lay on her side beneath the broken axle of the wagon, arms scraped raw from where they had bound her, lips cracked from thirst, breath a rasping whisper. No name passed her lips. There was no one left to answer to it. She had not cried when they turned their backs on her, not when the preacher spat at her feet, not when the women muttered prayers and curses of the same tongue, not even when they left her with a half can of beans and a leaking canteen. The last man who looked back had sorrow in his eyes, but no spine in his heart. Now only the crows stayed. They circled high above, waiting for death to do its work. Her breath came in shallow pulses, one eye swollen shut, the other fixed on the trembling edge of the horizon, where heat rippled like smoke. There something moved, a shape on horseback, at first only a blur, then a form against the afternoon sun, carved from the light itself. The buzzard scattered. She could not raise her head, but her fingers twitched toward the knife she no longer had. A groan escaped her throat, part warning, part plea. He dismounted in silence, walking toward her with the easy grace of a man unafraid of snakes or men. His shadow fell across her like a shroud. She waited for him to speak. He didn't. He just looked, studied her the way one might examine a broken arrow or a dying tree. His skin was deep bronze, dark hair braided tight, face marked with old scars, not tribal but earned. The kind men didn't survive unless they learned to be harder than whatever gave them. He knelt, touched her wrist, not gently, but not cruelly either, checked her pulse. Her mouth cracked open. "Water," she croaked. He said nothing. Instead, he opened his satchel and held a small clay flask to her lips. She drank too fast, coughing, the water spilling down her chin. Still, she drank. "Why?" she managed. His eyes were unreadable. He looked past her, toward the ridge, then back again. He spoke a few quiet words in a tongue she didn't know, voice low like distant thunder. Then he lifted her. She didn't weigh much anymore. Hunger and sun had taken their tax. But still, her breath hitched as his arms wrapped under her legs and back. She wanted to protest, to tell him to leave her be, let her finish what the others had started. But something in her chest betrayed her, a flicker of defiance, of need. His horse, tall and soot-colored, waited without tether. The man laid her across its back with practiced ease, mounted behind her, and turned toward the hills without a word. The ride was long. Each jolt of the horse sent pain up her spine, but she bit it down. She tried to study him from the corner of her eye. He moved like a man who did not answer to others. Not settler, not soldier, not even outlaw. Something older, wilder. Dusk settled by the time they stopped. A narrow canyon split open like a scar in the land. Red stone walls on either side, the air cooler, thick with sage and juniper. He helped her down, this time more carefully, and guided her to a ring of stone still blackened from old fires. She slumped beside it, body racked with tremors. He moved quickly, gathering brush, sparking flint, setting a pot to boil. She watched with fevered eyes, the scent of juniper smoke threading through her memories like ghosts. She remembered another fire, another night, her husband laughing with whiskey on his breath, fists clenched from anger he never explained. She remembered the way the settlers looked at her after his death, whispers of curses, of strange dealings. The preacher calling her unclean. "You don't have to save me," she said, voice hoarse. The man turned, squatted near her. Still no words, just a low, persistent stare. "I was meant to die out there." He reached into his satchel, drew out a length of soft leather, and began grinding dried roots into powder with stone. The smell hit her, sharp, bitter, medicinal. He dipped it into the boiling water and brought it to her lips. She drank. Later, by firelight, her fever broke. Sweat soaked her dress. Her dreams twisted between memory and nightmare. Her mother's hands weaving prayer knots. Blood on porch steps. The slow toll of a bell in a town that called itself Christian. She woke to find him sharpening a knife. The motion was rhythmic, almost soothing. The fire cast flickering shadows across his face, making him look ancient, carved from the canyon wall itself. "I don't know your name," she murmured. He paused, looked at her. "No, he said simply. She closed her eyes. The fire crackled between them. Coyotes howled in the distance, and something in the sound made her feel less alone. He didn't touch her again that night, just sat by the fire, keeping watch while she drifted between sleep and pain. In the darkness, with only embers for company, she whispered her husband's name once, not out of love, but mourning. Then she let it vanish into the wind. By morning, she would begin to forget it. But for now, she was alive, and not by her own choosing. That meant something. What? She didn't know. Not yet. But the man with no name had saved her, and somewhere in the dust and silence between his world and hers, something new had begun. The morning broke with a pale hush, light spilling slowly down the canyon walls like water over stone. She woke to the scent of smoke and earth, the fire down to glowing coals, a faint trace of sage in the air. Her body ached. But the pain was dull now, no longer sharp enough to make her wish for death. She sat up slowly, noticing the blanket tucked over her shoulders. Thick, woven, not hers. He was already awake, squatting near the stream that trickled between the rocks, rinsing something in silence. His movements were steady, deliberate. She watched him a long while before he turned his head slightly, acknowledging her without words. She tried standing. The canyon floor spun beneath her feet. He reached her before she fell, hand at her elbow, grounding her. She didn't flinch this time. They didn't speak, not in the way she was used to. When she asked simple things, he responded with nods or short phrases in his own tongue, gestures and patience filling the gaps. Somehow it was enough. They understood one another in the pauses. He handed her a strip of dried meat and a hunk of bread that tasted of pine smoke and herbs. She ate slowly, her hunger still more ghost than appetite, but each bite returned a little strength. The land around them was raw and red and sacred. Even in its silence, it had a voice. Ravens circled high above the stone walls, calling in pairs. Lizard tracks crisscrossed the sand like writing. She found herself listening for things she didn't know how to name. He taught her to watch the sky. When shadows fell long before midday, it meant a dust storm was coming. When the coyotes barked before sundown, someone else was near. When ants fled their hills, rain would follow. She memorized these lessons without meaning to. They came wrapped in necessity. One day he offered her a bow. It was smaller than his, carved of juniper, the sinews strung tight. She stared at it, unsure if it was a gift or a test. He nodded once and stepped back. Her hands were clumsy at first, fingers sore and untrained. The first arrow went sideways, the second lost in the brush. He said nothing, just watched. She kept trying. By the fourth day, she split a gourd from 20 paces. He didn't praise her, but he handed her another arrow without looking. It felt like more than approval. She asked his name again once, near the fire, while the moon sat low and full between the cliffs. He shook his head. Name is for those who have a place, he said. I have none. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that if the earth opened itself for him, if the wind bent to hear him, then surely he belonged. But she said nothing. Words could not go where wounds had taken root. Her own name, what it once meant, felt like a stone in her mouth. She hadn't spoken it since the settlers left her to the sun. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was the woman she had been, obedient, devout, silent. That woman was gone. They moved deeper into the land as her strength returned. He led her through ravines shaded by cottonwoods, where the air was cool and humming with insects. He showed her how to walk without leaving prints, how to find water by watching where birds flew, how to hear footsteps long before they reached the ear. In these lessons, something began to stitch itself back together inside her. Not the woman she had been, but something else, something tempered, not broken. Once, they passed a charred homestead. Black beams still jutted from the ground like ribs. She stared too long. He placed a hand on her shoulder, gently guiding her away. That night, she asked him if he had lost his home too. His answer came slow. My mother's voice was taken before I could remember it. My father died with a knife in his teeth, and no name left to curse. I buried my brother with a broken arm, and half his face gone. I stopped calling things home after that. She sat quiet beside him, firelight casting shadows over her face like mask and truth combined. Later, she found a brooch in his bag, a woman's brooch, silver and blue, too delicate to be his. She didn't mean to find it. Her hands had only been searching for bandages. When she confronted him, he didn't lie. It belonged to a settler, he said. He sold children to soldiers. I took it when I ended him. Her fingers trembled. She couldn't speak. She walked away from the camp and sat beneath a tree until the sun went down. The wind stirred the branches. The land did not judge. When she returned, he didn't ask where she'd been. He simply handed her a piece of smoked meat, as if nothing had passed between them but silence. She took it. One night, rain found them in the open. They took shelter in the remains of an old adobe mission, its roof long gone, walls worn down by time and sun. Inside, the floor was layered with dust and bird droppings, but it was dry. She lit a fire while he gathered brush. They didn't speak. The storm filled the world with sound. She sat near the flames, arms wrapped around herself. He joined her after a long time, his side barely touching hers. They sat like that for minutes, maybe hours. She turned to him. I would have died out there. I know. You didn't have to help me. I know. She reached out, fingers brushing the back of his hand. He didn't pull away. When she leaned forward, he didn't meet her halfway. He waited, letting her choose. Their lips met like the first drop of rain on dry stone, quiet, unexpected, irreversible. That night, they slept side by side, not out of need, out of something slower, something truer. She dreamt of fire, but this time it did not consume. It warmed. By morning, the rain had stopped. The land smelled of wet sage and ash. She woke before him and watched the sun climb the canyon walls, casting light across his face. She didn't know where the trail would lead, only that the path behind them no longer mattered. She wasn't the widow left to die anymore. She was a woman who had chosen to live. The desert stretched endlessly before them, golden and cruel, but she no longer feared it. The sun no longer felt like punishment, only presence, constant, unwavering, like the man who rode beside her. They had not spoken of the kiss beneath the crumbling mission roof, nor the night spent skin to skin beneath a shared blanket. But something had shifted. A current ran between them now, quiet but alive, as if some hidden root had finally touched water. Days passed, and they began to move with rhythm, with ritual. He rose before dawn to scout. She broke camp, rolled their blankets, checked the horses' hooves. He hunted with bow or snare. She cooked what he brought, seasoned with things he taught her to gather, wild onions, bitter leaf, mesquite pods. They shared the work as if they had always done so, and yet questions remained between them like bones beneath the sand. They circled one another in conversation, the way coyotes circle firelight, close enough to feel the heat, but not to burn. One afternoon, while he repaired the torn sole of her boot, she asked, "Have you ever been in love?" He did not answer at first. The silence lengthened until she thought he might ignore her. Then, softly, he said, "Once, long ago, we were too young. The soldiers came." Her name was forgotten with the smoke. She didn't press. He was a man who gave away his memories easily, but the weight of that answer stayed with her, like a stone in her pocket. That night, she told him her truth, not the version she'd rehearsed for strangers, but the truth. How her husband had changed after the war. How he drank. How he blamed her for every lost crop and sick calf. How the bruises became routine. How she began to walk the edge of the woods just to breathe. He called me cursed, she said, eyes fixed on the fire. Said I was the reason his mother died, the reason his luck soured. And when he was found dead in the ravine, they believed it. No trial, no questions, just exile. He said nothing, but his gaze never left her. She didn't need his sympathy. She only needed his silence to mean listening, and it did. Later, while combing her fingers through her drying hair, she found the turquoise charm he had given her buried in her satchel. She hadn't worn it since that first week. She held a moment, then tied it around her neck without ceremony. When he noticed, his eyes flickered, but he said nothing. That silence said everything. The next morning, they came across tracks, men, 5 at least with horses and wagons, headed south. Settlers. The trail was days old, but he grew quiet, more alert. He began walking with his bow always strung, his knife never far from his hand. She asked if he feared them. He didn't answer. Later, they found the remains of the camp. Ashes cold, wagon ruts deep, a torn doll left in the brush. The doll's face had been slashed. They came from the north, he said. Too clean, too quiet. She understood what he meant. Soldiers, perhaps, or worse. Vigilantes chasing shadows of guilt, hunting redemption with blood. That night, the wind howled through the canyons. She lay awake, feeling him stir beside her. Eventually, he sat up, staring into the dark. "Do you believe in forgiveness?" he asked. She blinked. "What kind?" "The kind that takes more than it gives." She thought for a long time. "I believe in choices," she said. "I believe in leaving things buried." He nodded, but his hands were clenched in his lap. She could see the war inside him, one that had no victor, only survivors. He stood, walked to the fire, and opened his satchel. From inside, he pulled something she hadn't seen before, a red cloth bundle tied tight with sinew. When he unwrapped it, the firelight glinted off iron and bone. She saw a pipe, carved with feathers and names, a string of beads, a ring too small for his fingers. "These are what's left," he said, voice low, "of my family, of the ones I failed." She moved beside him. Slowly, she placed her hand over his. "You didn't fail," she said. He looked at her then, and the pain in his eyes was deep as canyon stone, old as the bones beneath them. "I killed a man once," he said. "Not in war, not in defense. I killed him because I could, because I thought it would heal something inside me. It didn't." She didn't flinch. "I let my husband die," she said. "He was drunk, fell in the ravine. I saw him slip, but I didn't call out. I watched him go." The silence that followed was not judgment, but understanding. When the fire burned down, she took the pipe from his hands and laid it gently back in the cloth. Then she kissed him, slow, deliberate. Not passion this time, not need, something steadier, something that forgave without absolving. They stayed there another 2 days, gathering strength, waiting for the world to tilt just enough for them to move again. On the second evening, a lone coyote crept to the edge of their firelight. It watched them without fear. She tossed it a strip of meat. It sniffed, took it, and vanished. When they set out again, she rode ahead of him for the first time, navigating by sun and stone. He let her. The land began to shift as they moved westward. Smoother ridges, taller brush, the air tinged with salt from distant rivers. But the peace was not to last. On the third morning, while cresting a bluff, they saw smoke in the valley below, not from campfire, from buildings, black columns rising into the sky like a warning. He froze. "That's a settlement," he said. She nodded. "Yours?" "No," he said, but his face told another story. They watched in silence as the smoke swelled. Then came the sound, far off but clear. Gunshots, shouting, horses screaming. She turned to him. "What do we do?" He stared at the valley as if it had betrayed him. "We go down," he said. "If there's anyone left, they'll need us." She tightened the strap on her satchel, checked the knife at her belt. She didn't need convincing. The horses turned downhill as the sun climbed higher, slicing through smoke and ash. They rode together into fire, not because they had to, but because something in them refused to turn away. And for the first time, they were not running from the past. They were riding toward it. The smoke thickened as they descended, curling through the sagebrush like a serpent. Each breath tasted of ash and memory. The settlement below had once been small, wooden fences, a chapel, scattered homes, but now it was swallowed in flame. The wind whipped through with fury, scattering embers in the dry grass, and somewhere in the chaos, someone screamed. He dismounted first, bow in hand, scanning the perimeter with a hunter's poise. She followed, gripping the knife at her hip, her pulse a quiet drum in her ears. What they found wasn't a battle, but an execution already past. The bodies lay in the dirt like fallen grain, some clutching rifles, others still holding on to each other. Blood seeped into the earth, dark and final. There were no children among them. She stepped around a broken wagon wheel, her boots crunching over glass. The church bell swung crooked from its frame. Rope burned through. Beneath it knelt the only living figure, a man in a preacher's coat, head bowed as if in prayer. But when he turned, there was no grace in him. "Well," he said, rising slowly, "I'll be damned." Her body went cold. The scar on his cheek was the same. The voice, the eyes. He was the one who'd sentenced her with a sermon, left her in the dirt like carrion. She hadn't known if he'd lived after the northern raids. Now she did. He squinted at her. "I thought the crows picked you clean, girl." She didn't speak. The warrior stood beside her now, silent as a shadow. His bow remained at his side, unraised. The preacher's gaze shifted to him. "So it's true, then. You ran to them. Let one of them make you his." "You left me to die," she said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I spared you. You should have thanked me." Behind him, more men emerged, 3 in all, each armed, each wearing the dust of long travel. Not soldiers, not lawmen, the kind who work for bounty, not justice. "We followed a trail of scalps and burned wagons," the preacher said. "Figured he'd be with you." The warrior stepped forward, calm but lethal. "You burned this place." They harbored his kind. "They were women," she said. "Farmers, not fighters. They were traitors. And traitors don't get second chances." A breeze stirred the smoke, revealing more bodies in the chapel's shadow. Her throat clenched. "We should kill them now," one of the bounty men muttered. "Let her speak first," the preacher said. "Let her repent." She stepped forward before the warrior could stop her. Her voice didn't tremble. "I did nothing wrong. You lay with a savage. I chose to live." He sneered. "You chose damnation." She looked to the warrior. His eyes were calm, but something inside them was burning. "No more words," he said. The first shot came from the man on the left. The warrior ducked low, drawing his bow in a blur, the arrow striking the shooter's thigh with a sickening crunch. A scream, then chaos. Gunfire shattered the silence. Dust exploded around her boots. She fell to one knee behind the water trough, pulled her knife, and breathed through the panic. The preacher fired twice. Missed both. The warrior had vanished into the smoke, moving with the land like wind through the grass. One of the bounty men turned and dropped as an arrow found his spine. Another scream. Another silence. The last man charged her, pistol drawn. She didn't run. As he raised a weapon, she stepped inside his reach, driving the knife upward beneath his ribs. His breath left him with a grunt, his gun clattering to the ground. When he fell, he took her with him. She landed hard, but rolled, grabbing the pistol before he could twitch again. Her fingers curled tight around it. She rose to see the preacher backing toward the chapel doors, bleeding from a graze on his arm. He saw her and stopped. "Eve," he said, "don't do this." She walked slowly, pistol leveled. "You called me that before, as if I ruined something." "You did." "No," she said. "You just wanted someone to blame." Behind him, the warrior appeared in the doorway, blade in hand, face unreadable. The preacher reached for his boot, pulled a small derringer, but she fired first. The shot struck his hand. The tiny pistol dropped. He howled, sinking to his knees, clutching the ruin of his fingers. "I spared you," he gasped. "You tried to bury me." She stood over him for a long moment, then turned away. The warrior approached her slowly. Blood spattered across his chest. He looked down at the preacher, then at her. She shook her head. "He's done." Together, they buried the dead. Not the preacher, not the men who came with him, but the settlers who had died for sheltering someone the world wanted gone. She placed stones at their heads, whispered a prayer she didn't quite believe, and tied the turquoise charm to the chapel's broken beam. As the sun dipped low, they sat beside a burned-out wall, watching the light shift across the valley. Silence settled again, but not the heavy kind. This one breathed. He looked at her, and for the first time he spoke his name. It was soft, reverent, and it carried a weight she felt rather than understood. She repeated it, careful with the syllables. He nodded. They left at dawn, riding side by side. There was no destination, no map, only forward. She didn't ask what came next. The question no longer mattered. The land would change again. The sky would forget. But in the place where a widow once waited for death, and a warrior once carried only ghosts, something else had taken root, and it would not be burned away.